Thanks, Goose. Well, it's been a couple of years since we last saw the Chief, but now he's back with his very own remastered quadrilogy in Halo the Master Chief Collection. It's basically one huge all-you-can-eat buffet of Halo.
Tasty.
Cracking the case in 30 seconds.
Let's give our old friends a warm welcome.
I've already begun.
Aye, aye, ma'am.
Possibly make any more noise? I guess so.
They sure have crammed in a lot of Halo. The two spin-off games, Reach and ODST, aren't included. The focus here are the 4 main Halo campaigns, at about 10 hours a pop. Plus, there are over 100 multiplayer maps as well, and all sorts of playlists and other modes. It's a dizzying amount of content, isn't it, Hex?
Indeed. I think we need to be a little bit methodical about this and just go through all 4 Halos in order. The original Halo Combat Evolved was released way back in 2001. Then it got its own HD Anniversary Edition on 360, and that's largely the version that we have here.
Yes, the 360 version has had a bit of an update though. It's now running at 60 frames per second and 1080p. And of course, you can still flick back and forth between the old and new graphics engines just to see how much they've prettied it up. Old, new. New. Old, new. But while those 2001 graphics certainly have their rough edges, the game itself still plays well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that first Halo really reminds me of why this game became such a phenomenon. It's a straightforward story about one super soldier carving through enemy aliens, but the sci-fi setting itself has real depth and weight to it.
Yeah, that Halo ring is such a clever setting, isn't it? On the one hand, it's a giant weaponized space station, but then it's also this beautiful natural habitat.
Perhaps you can enjoy a nice forest hike while you're planning Galactic Armageddon.
Perhaps. Let's talk gameplay. This is from an era before shooters became obsessed with dialing it to 11 and hammering you with explosions. There's still a lot of shooting in it, but the encounters do feel smaller scale than we're used to. Plus, I missed features like quickly looking down gun sights and sprinting, which are commonplace in shooters today.
Yeah, that's true, but thankfully that core combat is just so polished, softening enemies up with weapons fire and grenades before finishing them off with a rifle butt to the face. Good times.
For me, Halo's at its best when you're in those outdoor battles.
Okay, Charlie Team, Warthog deploy.
You've got a lot more room to move, and you can bring the vehicles into play. After being bottled up in the game's corridor levels, fighting those enemies one at a time, it's just such a great payoff to switch to an overpowered tank.
More where that came from.
Looks like that armor wasn't so tough after all.
I think my only complaint with those outdoor battles is I really miss the ability to yank enemies out of vehicles like you can do in the later games. Speaking of which, we should move on to Halo 2.
Yes, now Halo 2 really is the star of the show. Compared to Halo 1's facelift, Halo 2 has had an extreme makeover. This is the one that's been visually rebuilt from the ground up for the Xbone. So switching between the old 2004 game and the new version can be pretty dramatic.
The lighting has been completely overhauled so that each location looks way more lifelike. And each of the characters have been reworked so that you can appreciate all the little details like scratches on their armor.
Good to go. Let's do it like that every time.
I think it's the Delta Halo level where you can see that switch between old and new in the most dramatic way. I don't remember these old textures being this bland, but flicking to the remaster. Oh yeah.
Yes, but despite how dramatic the overhaul is, it's still incredibly authentic to the original. I kept spotting little details in the distance, like these flying aliens, and thinking they must be new. But no, switch back, and they were always there. It's just that those fuzzy background details have really been brought to life now.
I know, like that ride in the underwater glass elevator from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. You couldn't see anything besides a few shadows, really, but now 343 have gone in and fleshed out the scene with so much extra detail.
But that's not to say that every location of the game has been as dramatically overhauled. There were a few spots, particularly in the futuristic building interiors, that only really had a slight touch-up.
One area where the remastering is obvious is with the cutscenes. They've been remade as little CGI movies, and stunning is an understatement.
Just one question. What if you miss?
I won't.
God, that new CG adds so much more depth to the performances, doesn't it?
For a brick, he flew pretty good.
Miranda Keyes, in particular, shows some real emotion now.
Just watching these made me wish they'd get that Halo movie out of development hell.
Oh, I know, right? But at least this collection does include access to that new Ridley Scott-produced Halo Nightfall miniseries. So, you know, that's something.
Plus, there are lots of little bits and pieces of Halo lore scattered throughout the in-game terminals too. But back to the story.
But this demon, this Master Chief,
By the time I learned the demon's intent, there was nothing I could do.
It picks up after the destruction of the first Halo ring and the enemy Covenant's defeat.
The game also made the interesting choice to split the narrative between Master Chief and the Arbiter, the Covenant commander who was responsible for losing that initial Halo battle.
They were pretty ambitious with those plot threads they were trying to connect back in 2004, but I found the storyline flowed a bit better in this version, and maybe that's a part of the benefit of playing these games back to back.
Fleet Admiral Harper, we are engaging the enemy.
But those new CG performances are just so much better.
Especially the Gravemind character. I mean, it was almost a laughable little shop of horrors plant monster in the original, but here it's fittingly horrifying.
Now I shall talk, and you shall listen.
Yeah, it's freaky. In terms of gameplay, Halo 2 built on the original in a few ways. Playing as the Arbiter was the biggest surprise for everyone, I think.
It was quite controversial at the time, but I'm glad they did it. The Arbiter has a cloaking ability that makes him feel different enough to justify the inclusion.
You could also dual-wield 2 weapons at once, which was another big change. Some said that in multiplayer this made things a bit overpowered or unbalanced, but it certainly added a lot to the single player.
And I've always enjoyed the extra physics they worked into the vehicles, so that when you're blasting them with your tank, the enemy goes to their own little explosive ballet dancers. Beautiful. But how good are the new tank sound effects?
Yeah, the sound design is the real superstar of this remaster. They went back and re-recorded all of the sound effects and music, and it makes a big difference. The SMG has gone from sounding like a lawnmower to a hardcore rifle crank.
Or the first time you power up the Ghost.
Epic. They've done an incredible job with the remaster on 2, so I wasn't really expecting that much from 3. And even though it was a great game, it was probably my least favourite of the Halo series. But they did better than I thought they would.
Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised too. The general mix of corridor combat and outdoor battles remains the same, but those outdoor locations are quite a bit larger and with way more enemies, so it really benefits from the HD upgrade.
Halo 3 was an early 360 game, and I remember it wasn't even running at 720p, so it wasn't the prettiest of games. But the boost of frame rate and the resolution has given it new life.
There are a handful of new weapons and vehicles to play with. And being able to take down those huge scarabs was always satisfying. But while I enjoyed this campaign, it still just felt like a notch below the others.
Yeah, it's a bit Halo 2.5, isn't it? But it did set up the next game well, and when Halo 4 came out a couple of years ago, it blew me away at just how good it was.
Yeah, I mean, while Halo 3 kind of muddied the plot a little, 4 bounced back with a really personal story between the Chief and Cortana.
Before this is all over, promise me you'll figure out which one of us is the machine.
Yeah, I was never a big fan of Cortana in the earlier games, but when we got to see her in 4, she was suddenly more vulnerable, and I think that gave her a lot of depth.
Look out!
Plus, the Forerunner villains were a good addition too.
Well, he's just a ray of sunshine, isn't he?
And the game already looked great in 2012, but wow, does it look amazing now?
Yeah, it was stunning. There were so many moments where I just had to stop and soak in the sci-fi gorgeousness. I think it even rivals the Halo 2 remaster in places.
Yeah, and the vehicles. There were so many highlights with this one. Finally, flying a Pelican. Epic space sequences. Good times. Playing through all 4 Halos back to back really is a good way to relive this iconic series.
Yeah, it's a little bit like sitting down to binge on an entire run of a classic TV show. You get the chance to appreciate the characters so much more when you're playing them back to back.
That is another Halo.
Say what?
We did have a few niggles with it too, though, didn't we?
Yes, this is a huge collection, as we've said, so it doesn't all fit on the one disc. What does come in the box is 45 gig worth of the 4 Halo campaigns and the default Halo 1 and 2 multiplayer maps. The bulk of the maps and all of the online modes can only be accessed with a hefty 20 gig patch.
Yeah, not including the entire game on the disc is an unusual move. I mean, some of the earlier Halo games actually shipped with separate multiplayer discs, and that arguably would have been the better way to go here.
It's also a bit buggy. We had cutscenes reset and crash on us. We also had a few lockups that forced us to close the game from the dashboard, and the profile and save game system doesn't always work.
Obviously, we were able to work through these bugs and still have a great time playing through the campaigns. But locking content and bug fixes away from people who can't download a 20 gig patch does show how important it's now becoming to have your consoles connected online.
Yes, and unfortunately that patch wasn't live at the time of recording this review. But we were able to play the local multiplayer for Halo 1 and 2, so we jumped back into the iconic Blood Gulch. It's still such a good map for vehicles.
Yeah, and it's nice to see they've included the Halo 1 maps that were made just for the PC version. So this will be the first chance many people will have had to run around maps like the Silent Cartographer remake Death Island.
I do have a little concern that the 100+ maps spread over 4 games might fracture the online community when this does go live, but then there are so many people that play Halo, maybe not. And I'm very keen to try out the 6 Halo 2 maps they've rebuilt with the updated graphics engine. And the new Gun Goose vehicle.
Obviously, we would have liked to have spent more time with the multiplayer, but it's already clear that this collection is an absolute treasure chest for any Halo fan. 343 could have just remastered Halo 2, and I suspect most of us would have been happy with that. But to remaster all 4 games and the multiplayer maps is pretty staggering.
Yeah, there is just so much content here. I think this is worth 9.5 out of 10 rubber chickens.
Yeah, I agree. And also, what a great entry point for someone who somehow missed the Halo craze. I'm giving it 9.5 as well.
That's it, you're dead!
What the hell? Take that, traitor!